Hey guys, Matt here. This is my review of Pain and Gain. This movie is directed by Michael Bay, who previously directed the Transformers movies. This movie stars Mark Wahlberg, Dwayne Johnson, and Anthony Mackie, with Tony Shalhoub and Ed Harris. Now the plot of this movie is the year is 1995, and Mark Wahlberg plays Danny Lugo, a bodybuilder who's really bored with his life and wants more out of it. So he recruits Dwayne Johnson and Anthony Mackie, and they decide to kidnap this millionaire and take everything that he has. Now, this movie is surprisingly based on a true story. And so since it's a Michael Bay movie, we don't get action, we don't get huge explosions. Instead, we get a bit of drama with a bit of comedy and proof that truth is stranger than fiction. Now, the best way I can describe this movie is imagine Mark Wahlberg's early movie, The Big Hit, mixed with Michael Bay's Bad Boy movies. And then you get Pain and Gain. You get a movie that looks like a Michael Bay movie with the horizon, the sunlight shining on people's faces, the slow motion, the saturated colors, and then you get the obnoxious main characters. Now, let me start with the acting in this movie. Mark Wahlberg as Danny Lugo, he worked. You know, it wasn't your silent, tough guy Mark Wahlberg. You know, he was the loud and boisterous, obnoxious Mark Wahlberg, and he worked. Dwayne Johnson in this movie was probably the best of the main characters. He was really, really good, and it showed that he had great range, going from this, you know, this this religious guy at the beginning of the movie, and then he goes through a change, and he's just like this coke-headed. it was funny. It was a nice transition to watch. And then you have Anthony Mackie as a side character, who really didn't bring that much to the table. He was just your quick-speaking, you know, idiot as well, part of the group. Tony Shalhoub as the guy that they kidnapped. Good job. He really was a character that you were like, okay, this guy's supposed to be a bad guy in their eyes. Yeah, he's going to come off that way. Though I could have seen that character also played by John Turturro. He was in Transformers movies. He played the butler in Mr. Deeds. He's been in a lot of stuff. But the best acting job in the whole movie probably would go to Ed Harris, because he's a veteran actor and he shows it in this movie. Great job on his part. And then you had some side characters, including Rob Corddry, Rebel Wilson, and even a very attractive stripper played by Bar Pally. Some of them could have been in the movies, others weren't necessary at all, and so, like a Michael Bay movie, you get a lot of those side characters as well. Everyone looks fine and fit, so if you're a female, you've got guys like Mark Wahlberg and Dwayne Johnson to look at, but if you're a male, you have the very attractive women and the very attractive stripper that the guys recruit in the movie to look at as well. Everybody was fit in this movie. It took place in Miami in the mid-90s, so everybody was attractive. Now, let me get on to the basic movie itself. Now, this is a true story, and it's based on actual tragic events in the mid-90s. Now, let me say that this movie doesn't condone the actions that were done by these characters, but it doesn't necessarily say, hey, we're making light of the situation either. It's like the movie Scarface, where the story is essentially about a guy that's not a nice guy at all, but it kind of portrays him as the hero, as the guy that you almost want to root for. Now, this movie doesn't say, hey, what Rock and Mark Wahlberg and Anthony Mackie are doing is right, and you should go out and do that, because it portrays them as idiots. It makes them bumbling. It makes them fail. It makes them rise quickly and fall even quicker. This movie did a good job of stating, hey, this is supposed to be the 90s. You had a bunch of fashion and vehicles and even a nostalgic soundtrack. But every once in a while you'd have some product placement that slipped through the last decade or so. Now, some problems I have with the movie was the chemistry between the characters. The three characters were more like the Three Stooges rather than a team, because they were always yelling at each other and calling each other names. So if any one of them had to carry this movie, I think it would have failed. Then you have the length of the movie itself. 2 hours and 10 minutes long. That's pretty long. And they had this long, slow build-up towards the Tony Shalhoub kidnapping, and then once that's over and done with and Ed Harris is introduced, then it just felt like the movie was rushing to finish itself. You also have these voiceovers. At the beginning of the movie, you know, Ed Harris opens and closes the movie with voiceovers stating, hey, this is a true story and this is what really happened. But then you have Mark Wahlberg's perspective, which is okay. And then you have The Rock's. And then you have Anthony Mackie's, and then you have Tony Shalhoub's, and it's like, okay, I guess they're going to do this with every character. But they only did it for the first half of the movie, and then they stopped. Another thing that was inconsistent was subtitles. If something silly was going on or whatever, they would freeze frame it, and they would have some text in the bottom. You know, one said, "Yes, this is still a true story," and others, you know, kind of described the scene to make it funny. But it was like, if you're not going to be consistent and do it throughout the whole movie, don't do it at all. Now, because this story was a true story, they wanted to make it entertaining, so Michael Bay put his own spin on it. He made it silly. He threw in his actors. He threw in his soundtrack. He threw in his camera looks and everything like that. If these people had gotten away with this murder, then I think it would have been a whole different story. But Michael Bay made this true story entertaining, and that's exactly what this movie was. It went from a comical aspect, not incredibly funny and hilarious, but, you know, just aware of itself, to serious at the end. They show you the trial. They show you how they got caught. They show you the characters and who they portray, and then they show you the real people in their mugshots. So it goes from, to, dang, I didn't know about this, but it's pretty serious. So I'm running a 1 to a 5 because Pain and Gain was entertaining, and I feel like that's all it tried to be. I'm going to give Pain and Gain a 3.5. Now, if you're a fan of Michael Bay, I recommend this movie because it's different for him to do the things that he did in this movie. He had an overly sexual movie, but at the same time, he cut back on his action and his explosions and his Shia LaBeouf and his Transformers, so that was nice. Dwayne Johnson and all the other actors, they did a good job. So this movie was enjoyable, but it wasn't the best, because after all, it is Michael Bay. So until next time, guys, see ya.